Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, welcome to Ngalir, Ngobrol ala IR, organized by Diplomacy Lab, Department of International Relations, Universitas Islam Indonesia, on Wednesday, 27th of July, 2022. You can watch our live YouTube from s.id/Ngalir Talk or directly go to our YouTube channel, Department of International Relations, Universitas Islam Indonesia. And do not hesitate to subscribe our channel and also like our videos. And I am Dian, and I am very happy to announce that today we have two very inspiring speakers. The first speaker is Mr. Haza min Fadli Robbi. Assalamualaikum, Mr. Haza.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Mr. Haza, for joining us. Mr. Haza is assistant professor from Department of International Relations, Universitas Islam Indonesia. And his expertise are Turkish politics, Indian politics, religion, and international relations. How are you, Bung Haza? Fine?
Fine, thank you. Thank
you.
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. Are you ready to share your thoughts on Turkey's crisis?
Of course.
Okay, of course, Alhamdulillah. And I am very happy to introduce our second speaker. We have Mr. Ayanangsha Maitra. How are you, Mr. Ayan? Hello, Mr. Ayan. Can you hear me? Okay.
Sorry. Walaikum assalam, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
Okay. I am very happy to have you here as our speaker for this theme. And Mr. Ayan is a foreign affairs journalist and also a researcher from CGS, or Center for Governance Studies. And he is now joining us from India. Alhamdulillah. Okay, everyone, tonight we are going to have a discussion on Turkey and Sri Lanka economic crisis, a lesson for Indonesia. And I personally think that the two crises are not something that only Indonesians should know, but those two crises also should be the lesson for many countries, especially in terms of developing the sense of the crisis. Okay. For the introduction, we know that Turkey and Sri Lanka, they are the two examples of how the states experience economic inflation. And the data also shows that Sri Lanka has reached 54% of inflation rate these days. And this number of the inflation also led Sri Lanka to bankruptcy, and the government also collapsed, and its prime minister also flee to other countries due to the crisis. And its citizens also had to struggle with daily power cuts, shortage of basic needs such as fuel, foods, and also medicines. And it did not only happen in Sri Lanka, but also happened in Turkey, because we see from the data and also the latest news about Turkey's economic condition, there is the increase of inflation rate and maybe worse than Sri Lanka. And the latest data shows that it reached almost 80%. And of course, it makes Erdogan as the president, as the decision maker, also blamed by some experts and also economists for lowering the interest rates. Okay, maybe I should give my first question to Mr. Haza. Okay, Mr. Haza, we know from the news that Turkey has reached its inflation rate in almost 80%, and this number is the highest in 25 years. And it also shows that this become the main problem of the Turkey government that should be tackled by the government. However, we see from the news, we watch from the online news that President Erdogan told that the main problem is not about inflation. And I also read from the newspaper that President Erdogan also stated that it is actually a good chance for Turkey to improve its tourism sector. Okay, Mr. Haza, what do you think about it? How do you see this from your perspective? What are the causes that actually lead to Turkey economic crisis? Maybe you should explain more to us, something that we don't know. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Dian, for the question, and also for the lab of diplomacy to provide me the opportunity to share some of my perspective on Turkish economic crisis. First of all, I'd like to confirm that my forte is not in this field exactly, because I'm more focusing on Turkish political dynamics, but I'm trying to transfer whatever I've observed and I've read about Turkey's economic crisis, particularly caused by the inflation, hyperinflation actually. So the first thing that I would like to clarify is that Turkish crisis is not something new. So Turkey has experienced at least 3 different kind of crises that firstly happened in 1994. The crisis 1994 was happening because of the public debts, and this is actually the reflection of populist politics that was being implemented by Tan Suu Kyi and also her coalition cabinet, which tries to win people's heart by building a lot of infrastructure and also trying to lower down the fee of the public services. And after that, we were also witnessing the 2001 financial crisis, which happened because of the political instability in Turkey and also the problems in Turkish macroeconomics fundamentals, and this has caused again the valuation in Turkish value of money, and luckily IMF intervened, and after that AK Party rises to power because exactly AK Party supported the steps that were offered by the neoliberalist politics implemented by IMF, according to the Washington Consensus. And after that, Turkey has also experienced the 2007 and 2008 global economic crisis, but it is not affecting Turkey so much. But we have to look into the internal causes of the current economic crisis that has hit Turkey for almost 3 years for now, since 2019, and COVID-19 obviously make it worse. The real causes behind this is because the government is continuously intervening the financial and also economic policies enacted by the PPK, which is the board and also the governmental agency, independent agency, which is responsible to manage the Turkish financial economic policy, and also the Turkiye Cumhuriyeti Merkez Bankası, or the Central Bank of the Republic of Turkey, is supposed to have the full control over the financial politics in Turkey. But then again, Erdogan and also his cabinets, his minister working in this portfolio, are continuously intervening into the financial politics, because Erdogan didn't want to see a high interest rate, because it doesn't goes along with the religious teaching of Islam, which actually forbids
riba.
Yeah, riba, exactly, Ms. Dian. Yeah, so Erdogan wishes to see that Turkey implements a lower interest rates, because if we lower the interest, according to Erdogan and also his ministers in the cabinet, if we are lowering down the interest, then we could lower the interest rate. And this is something that is very unrealistic and doesn't suit the current macroeconomic situation in Turkey, because this will affect the financial sectors, and Turkey has lost many opportunities since the COVID-19 begins. Of course, there are still some investment coming from the Middle Eastern countries, but many investors coming from the Western countries are very much curious over the next future projections of the Turkish economic crisis. So that's what I have to say for now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haza, for telling us that Turkey crisis is actually not something new for Turkey, but I want to know what makes the current crisis different from the previous crisis. And do you think that the Erdogan policy is because he is too confident? Because from his political career, we see that Erdogan has succeeded in tackling the previous crisis. What do you think about it, Mr. Hazza?
Okay, so there are many versions and many arguments that could answer this question. But I'd like to mention one of the argument developed by several Turkish economists. So they're saying that the Turkish crisis, the crisis that Turkey is currently facing, is the combination of three different kind of inflation. The first one is the cost inflation, the second one is demand inflation, and also the built-in inflation. So this is happening because of the what is it? Lack of clear independence of a Turkish financial body to actually control the interest rate, but also there are also some trends where people are trying to stock up the goods and services, and also instead exchanging their lira to dollar in order to stock up their money so that they could have larger saving, and this has caused devaluation in Turkey's lira's value in the current market, and we have seen that currently Turkish lira value is so low to the point that many of the diasporas and also foreign students are having hard times living there. I've seen many of my friends in Indonesian students in Turkey are struggling to make their ends meet, so they have to rely to Indonesian rupiah instead of Turkish lira in order for them to survive. If they can have a job elsewhere, they would have the job in order to cover their daily needs. And it is obviously very hard for ordinary Turkish people who are having blue collar jobs, because they are in need of second job that will fulfill the needs of their family, especially if we are noticing that Turkish families are large in terms of number. In one family, you usually have like 2, 3, or 4 children, and the father has to make the end meet, obviously, and this is not something that is easy for most Turkish families, especially those who are hanging on a thread. Yeah, they are working as wage labor or working as a seller in the market. It is very hard for them. But for people who are working in the governmental sector, it will be easier, but still things are quite hard for Turkish at the moment. So that's what I can say for now, Ms. Dian.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hazan, for the insight. And let's move to Mr. Ayan. Mr. Ayan, we know that inflation in Sri Lanka has reached more than 50% today, and it has now become one of the biggest economic threats to the Sri Lanka. And we see some say that it was affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and there are other opinions or other perspective that try to explain Sri Lanka's crisis is because the mismanagement of the economy by the president, by the Sri Lanka government, or because Sri Lanka is too dependent to the imported products and also international loans. Yeah, And what do you think about it? What are the actual causes of Sri Lanka's crisis, Mr. Ayan?
Yeah, so there are, of course, not, the pandemic can't be blamed for the catastrophe. There are a slew of reasons. And before I go into the details, I'd like to tell you the very town I'm joining in right now. It's Chennai, earlier known as Madras. And there's a port, it's called Dhanushkodi. And, the Sri Lanka is just 27 kilometers from them, from that particular area. So the state I'm joining in, it is a very Tamil-dominated area. It's the state of Tamil Nadu. And Sri Lanka, the Tamil community's strength there. And both among these two states, I mean, the Indian state of Tamil Nadu and the Sri Lanka's Tamil community, they have very strong linguistical affinity towards each other. And you all know what happened during the civil war, the Tamil sentiment here. And we lost our Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi for the very reason. So let me tell you this: for almost any big thing, it's not necessarily one thing or one factors that matters and ultimately causes it. There are a lot of things, a slew of rainbow of things can be named. So among them, if you talk about the economy, the problem is the both things to blame, the politics and economy. It's not an economic disaster as well. It's a political political misengineering, and at the same time the economic mismanagement. So if unstable fiscal deficit and current account deficit, I repeat, the unstable fiscal deficit and the current deficit, both are to blame if you talk about the economic front. Of course, the foreign lenders, the tourism industry are also equally responsible for this catastrophe, because in Sri Lanka, and if you find this similarity with Indonesia as well. It's a touristic hub. If you talk about when you talk about Indonesia or Sri Lanka, the whole world knows it's as a tourist destiny. So the catastrophe affected it terribly. Especially the tourism sector, which contributes nearly about the 10% of the GDP. It's hampered the economy. But you can't blame the COVID alone. We have seen the very tiny economy, which were only dependent on the rest of the others. Basically, which was the hub of logistic hub. But Colombo, of course, had certain other production. It didn't do that. It didn't hamper on that. So political thing is the biggest thing. So right now, the man of the moment in Sri Lanka, Ranil Wickremesinghe, he, in the 2020 election, he became a lone parliamentarian. His party, the UNP, was one of the biggest in the country. They are the direct rival of the SLPP of the Gotabaya Rajapaksa. But people completely ditched him. I mean, because no, this man is not efficient. But you see, at the time, he's almost, very aggressively conquered the Colombo's chair, the top chair. It's a moment just days after the people agitated not just the government building, but his house as well. It shows the anger of the people and the agitators' protest, which formed years after years. It's not just a one-day crisis. So after that, a person assumes the chair. It says a lot. It serves against the autonomy, the authoritarianism in the country, even amid this crisis. So you can understand when the presidential office, the prime minister's house is said ablaze, the protesters are occupying that. They're using, it's like a picnic spot. The very days after, an authoritarianism booms in again. So this is again something to do, give a message, Even after this protest, they know that we have the power to protect authoritarianism. So when you talk about the presidency of this Ranil Wickremesinghe, it's not a democratically elected president. There are potential candidates, for example, Sajid Premadasa, or the leagues like JVP, Jano Vimukti Peramuna. The JVP was functioning during the time of civil war as well. So they had the public support, and this JVP is left-leaning. And its alternative, for example, this Sajid Premadasa, who once a loyalist of this Ranil Wickremesinghe, he has formed his own party, SJB. I'm regularly in touch with his party man, the youth leader of SJB. So I know the sentiment of the people. It's completely against the party of Ranil Wickremesinghe, but there's a vacuum. There's a power vacuum. There's no one. So it was the perfect moment for a person who long time dreamt to be president to, assume the office, and luck favored him that particular time because Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled, so there is no one. And if you see who is the prime minister, the prime minister is an candidate of the SLPP, the Gotabaya's, party. So here I have to say, it's not about the pandemic and the mismanagement. It says a lot about the political crisis. The political crisis is not about this 2 years during this 2020 and 2022. It began from a long time. And if you see, for example, the Tamilians in there, we all have heard about the Sam Selvadurai and Nihal de Silva, out of a lot of authors and intellectuals from Sri Lanka. But where are they? most of them, they fled to Canada, most of them, they fled to London, most of them went to elsewhere because they didn't have a voice. The same happening in India, the Lankan state, the island, and authoritarianism, governs the entire country. It's the ultimate way. So the Gotabaya had certain of factors. First of all, in South Asia, India is considered to be one of the big, landmass, and it has a big population as well. But they never trusted, they never, the Rajapaksa regime, they didn't, gain the trust of India because they were kept on swindling between the parties and all. They were going to the Chinese bloc once. They fell in the debt trap. For example, this Hampentota. Why this Hampentota? Because this Rajapaksa's regime, they availed the Chinese loan and, decorated, made huge construction, made skyscraper in Hampentota. That everything was the Hampentota centric rather than across the country. Because Namal Rajapaksa, his son, one of his sons, he is a parliamentarian from that very place, this Hampentota, and it was their home district as well. So they are taking the Chinese loan at a huge rate, and they're putting into, instead of public welfare, they're making into a business or something in the Hampentota, that area, instead of the across state. So this Chinese money, when the money comes, it comes in a several, forms. The loan of the total loan, the 51 billion, the Chinese accounts for nearly 6.5 billion, nearly more than 10% of the total loans. Plus, there are certain hidden taxes as well. So Sri Lanka can't get away of it. For example, what you have seen, this Hampentota, the China has a policy, it's called string of pearls. String of pearls is basically to contain India. They take the 7 countries port, including Sri Lanka's Hampentota, and they make infrastructure there and use as a military base. And it's, of course, the Chinese propaganda is to act against India. But when do they do it? They didn't understand the Sri Lankan that they have leased the Hampentota port for 99 years. It's a big source of economy. It's not just about the military power. For smaller powers, military is a secondary thing. The first thing is economy. When you can sustain when you lose your autonomy, when you lose your sovereignty, it speaks a lot about the, the outsiders' invasion. So, of course, it's an economic crisis and economic mismanagement, but there are a lot of short-sighted policies as well. For example, the Gotabaya regime, they almost half the several taxes, including the value-added taxes and some high-end taxes, for the elites and all. So a populist policy is basically to blame. Even in India, we have seen the populist policies, populist kings are used for gaining votes. Narendra Modi's government and some states' government in my state, West Bengal, and Rahul Gandhi also said about the, giving money to the farmers directly. So where the money comes from? The money doesn't come from heaven. The money has a source, and ultimately it's the people who pays. I'll just give you an anecdote. I'll just give you a fable. There was a lion in the jungle, and the lion once addressed a horde of ships, the ships. And lion addressed to the ships, the winter is coming, and I will give you the blankets and sweater. And the ships have come back to their homes, and they're telling their kids, look, our king, our emperor is so, great. He's giving us this winter clothes and blankets as the winter is approaching. Then the baby sheep is asking to the mother, where the wools are coming from. So, okay. Yeah. So this is the thing about the freebie politics and the populist regime. Lau has written about this. I'm sure Hasdar Ravi, Professor Ravi knows more about this. So the populist politics this way works. The right-wing thing, everywhere. If you talk about Pakistan, it worked. And everywhere in the world, this right-wing politics and populism, the populist politics are going this way. So another thing is they took very short-sighted policies. They didn't say what are the consequences are going to be. They didn't consult the big economists or the macroeconomists, how it is, going to impact the lower middle level bracket people and, the SMEs, the smaller middle economies, because they constitute a large number of people. Your economy can be big, but how much this SMEs contribute, how much this SMEs earn, it matters a lot about the society. For example, China and India, in the 1990s, almost have the same population, like what should be around 350 million or something. But look at China, it has elevated its population, but India has failed to do that. So that's the reason that China has, achieved economically a terrific digit, which India hasn't, it favored the China's luck. So one of the policies of this, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, they banned the import of chemicals and fertilizer. For example, the urea. So they're saying, my sources from Jaffna told me what they found, they're having the kidney and other diseases. So they decided not to go ahead with the, fertilizers and chemicals. They promoted this, without the agriculture without these things, and with the bio ingredients. So as a consequence, it hampered their agriculture. Their export, went down, and they had to import more and more to the food product. It's also an interesting area for food processing industry. So right immediately after, the pandemic, this thing hampered them directly. They didn't have food. Their import is much more than their export. So that is one of the reasons their foreign currency is a deficit. I think their import is nearly about 3 billion. It's terrific, when it comes to about the export. We have know how the Sri Lanka has suffered. Sri Lanka has exported the teas and everything. The entire world is known for the Sri Lankan teas and then some spices. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anand, for the insight. We know that the crisis is not only caused by the pandemic. We cannot blame the pandemic alone, but it is also happened because the economic mismanagement and also political misengineering. Okay, thank you. And before I give the next question to Mr. Haza, I would like to inform to our viewers who join us from our YouTube channel, if you have any questions, you can write your questions directly on our YouTube live chat. Okay. Next question for Mr. Haza. Mr. Haza, could you explain how Turkey government respond to the crisis in terms of the economic crisis and also critics from the people regarding to Erdogan policy?
So currently we are witnessing that the government of Turkey is still standing to its previous policies, which is to maintain the lower interest rate, despite of many criticism coming from academics and also many economic experts regarding Erdogan's low interest policy. We have to know that the source of Erdogan's low interest policy rooted from what was existed in Turkish political tradition as the national outlook vision that was once being constructed by Professor Dr. Necmettin Erbakan. So at the time, Necmettin Erbakan, which was considered as the proponents of Islamist politics in Turkey, really wanted to create Turkey based on this principle of free interest Turkey's economic system, which goes along with the Sharia economic policies. But of course, this principle was very much rejected by economists. But Erdogan tried to live up to that ideal. Sadly not was looking into the realistic politics. So we can see that Erdogan's insistence in applying the low interest politics is reflection of this moralistic approach to solve many real world solutions. And I think this has caused many many harms to Turkish people as well. If you are looking into the perspective of people, many are still believing in his cause, especially from his longtime supporters, um, and they believe that this is something that we can go through because we've passed many political crises from the 2016 attempted coup conducted by the Fatullah group. We've successfully passed that, and we obviously will pass this all the way, because we have so many crises together. So this is something that Erdogan supporters are trying to say. Erdogan even has termed this crisis as well as a phase of expensive life. Yeah, so we have to pass this in order to go to the next level. So this is something that all Turkish must go through. So he called it as hayat pahalı, or something that goes along with the increase in daily needs, increase in daily price. So everyone should be ready for that. And Erdogan says that he will adjust a government macroeconomic policy, but he still say that he will not at all level to increase the interest rates, because it doesn't goes along with his political value. Yeah, so that's it, Ms. Dian.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haza. I think I should ask Mr. Haza one more question before we give the question to Mr. Anand. What do you think about the future of Turkey's crisis, Mr. Haza? Will it be worse, or maybe Erdogan, because he has some experiences in tackling the crisis, so the crisis will be better, or maybe something else will happen?
Yeah, so here's the thing. So Turkey is we will be having its 100th anniversary next year, the 100th year of the founding of Republic of Turkey. So so next year will be a very, very monumental year for Turkey, and Turkey will be also having its election in 2 years to come. So I think that will decide the course of the economic crisis in Turkey. Many opposition parties in Turkey has prepared a new economic model that that really serves as an alternative agenda. They will rationalize the economic model that is currently applied by Turkey, and they are trying to restore the confidence of Turkish credibility in front of the foreign investors, particularly coming from the European Union, because as we can see in a lot of data that Turkey is still one of the strategic partners, economic partners for European Union. And if Turkey loses the trust from its European counterparts, it will cause a huge losses from Turkey. So currently Turkey is trying to make up for the losses by inviting many investors coming from Middle East and also coming from East Asia. But Turkey should be careful in managing its debt rates, especially coming from foreign countries, because if Turkey really relies on its foreign debts, that especially for its infrastructure, because there are several projects, not like Hambantota that was mentioned by Ayan before, but there are several infrastructure projects that were being supported by foreign debts as well. And Turkey really has to be careful in in managing the percentage of this foreign debt, so that to make it as a default, given in future dynamics of Turkey's economy. So the first thing is that the current political dynamics will decide the future course of Turkey's economic crisis. So whoever wins outside of AK part will really determine the outcome of the crisis. Yeah, so that's what I need to say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haza. But maybe one more question for Mr. Haza.
Yeah.
Do you observe the current Turkey's tourism does their tourism really increase because of the crisis? Because we see many arguments about it in the media. What do you think about it, Mr. Haza?
Okay, thank you very much for the question, Ms. Dian. We see that Turkey also relies much on its tourism sectors. That's why Turkey is currently offering many economic packages to foreign tourists, particularly coming from Indonesia. And Turkey has its strength, especially in the tourism sector, because Turkey can always really pack its a travel package as religious and something that is also economic to many. But Turkey should not only rely on this sector, because there might be another wave of pandemic that will hit the tourism sector, obviously, and also there are also concerns about the political instability in Turkey. That will affect people's perception on Turkey as well. So I think that tourism could serve as a temporary remedy for Turkey's economy, because it will bring the foreign currency to Turkey, and it will contribute to Turkey's economy, but it's not a permanent solution. It's only temporary.
Okay, of course, that's not the permanent solution. Okay, let's move to Mr. Anand. I would like to ask Mr. Anand, could you tell us more about how did Sri Lankan people respond to the crisis? We know that there were many protests, but is it just about protests, or there are people also struggle to solve their problems, or maybe is there any support from the non-governmental organization in tackling the crisis? Mr. Anand?
Sorry, Indian government is support from the?
No, I asked about Sri Lankan people.
No. Okay, but support from the which organization you say?
Any organization, maybe.
Okay, yeah. Of course, see, the people are suffering terribly. I maintain a direct contract there in some parts of Sri Lanka. I get updates from there, visuals I keep on tweeting. So the thing is, 360 Sri Lankan rupees. By the way, the India's currency and Sri Lanka's currency both are called rupees, despite there are huge differences, and our time zones are the same. I mean, there's no difference between the two time zones up to times across the nation, across 2 states. So let me come back to your point. Yeah, the people are suffering terribly. Many of them were habituated to have just 2 meals a day instead of 3 meals, and many even are having just 1 meal. So 360 Lankan currency make about $1. So that's the inflation rate. So people were terribly suffering from the fuel crisis. But from past few weeks, the fuels are available in places. Of course, the price has, tripled. Sometimes, there's 4 times. And the public commuters, public vehicles are getting the fuels. So which helps the people to, commute. So even though the commuting is very restricted, the staffs are asked to work from home and very minimal mobility is happening. But, the public travel is a very essential thing, which is, the resume. The schools are also announced to be open. So there are certain of facts. One side is from the government sides. Second side is the enterprises, because the government can sustain the entire economy. It's also the hand of the enterprises and then the corporate. And thirdly, the public and in general who are into the informal economy. The 3 sides the government has to manage. So there are the Ranil Wickremesinghe is a 6-time prime minister, as you know. The prime minister is as an opposition leader, he was a prime minister, and at the same time he was negotiating with the IMF. So these procedures helps a lot, because he is already a familiar face in the IMF. He knows how the process works. And he knows all the corridors, he knows all the officials and the functionalities. So this will help Sri Lanka in a certain way, because he is a known face to some of the officials. he can gain the trust, and he can convince the officials. And IMF director has already told, like, they're in talks, and she will try to mitigate it quickly. From the Indian side, our Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, had talks, and she is also supporting to get rid of the crisis. India has supported 3.8 billion, to Sri Lanka, and India has sent essential commodities, including foods, medicines, and other supplies, including urea, because urea is very essential for agriculture. And right now, the Sri Lanka army is also producing food there into agriculture, because the country is a shortage of food. So Ranil Wickremesinghe has to ensure free flow of certain things, for example, food, because the country doesn't have a foreign exchange and reserve at the moment. It's almost like 250 million, which is terribly, terribly low. So the country, the dollar rate, has come down to a certain point, 360 Sri Lankan rupee. So Ranil Wickremesinghe, what he has to do, he has to settle a talk with the IMF, because there's a slew of countries, which a board of countries who are interested in helping Sri Lanka, but they didn't. Why? Because there's a political instability. You can't give, aids or money during a crisis. Why the West countries were doing the same thing during the Afghan crisis, even it's wrong? Because you need a stable government. You need stable participation of all the, participation of your leaders indiscriminately. So the countries are basically looking for a stable government in Sri Lanka, which they're observing still now. The countries like Japan, who was a big development partner across the world, they discarded helping in Sri Lanka because of the same reason. And by the way, the Gotabaya regime, the Gotabaya incumbency rejected Japan's proposal and Japanese projects in the land. So first, the president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, has to deal with IMF very carefully. At the same time, he has to maintain the free flow of essentials from the neighboring states, because aid can't make you run for the long time. You need to buy, you need to import things. For that, you need to have a proper negotiation with the IMF. We have seen India was in a terrible condition in the 1990 when Narasimha Rao was in the chair. We had a very visionary Prime Minister. Manmohan Singh, our former our Prime Minister, was the economic at the helm of economic affairs. So we fixed it. He was the father of the management of this Indian economy at the point of time. We opened up our economy. But of course, Sri Lanka's position is quite different in that terms. But IMF is the only way. He needs to hold talks with IMF and all the Bretton Woods institution, the Western partners, the Western capitals, including Washington, D.C. and some of other traditional helpers like, and for that, he needs to get support of Japan as well. To need the support of Japan, he had to ensure like some of the Japanese products are resumed, and he can't go in the line of Chinese. He can't echo what the Chinese once said up. So that's the thing actually he basically instead to do, because AIDS can survive you alone. And then he has to open up his economy. He has to privatize certain the government-owned enterprises. Maybe in it's a financial institute, maybe it's the Lankan Airlines. It may have to privatize. And Sri Lankan Bank, Sri Lankan Bank has to gain more autonomy, and he has to free from the political lobby. It has to gain the autonomy and the power. So then only it can rule on its own. And its fiscal management policy, it has to review. That's the one of the crucial thing. Every problem has a remedy, and a political leadership is the answer. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anand, for telling us your insight. Okay. I am very happy we have 3 questions from the viewer from our YouTube channel. And the first question is from Ayanangsha Maitra. And this question is for Mr. Haza. Okay, Mr. Hazza stated that in 1994, recession of Turkey was caused by massive infrastructure developments. So how do you see Indonesia, which also developed its infrastructure massively?
All right. So, one thing to clarify. So, Alfer is actually my high school mates who is currently working in financial sector. So, I
maybe
think
you can say hello to
hello, Alfer.
Ayanangsha.
So, so thank you, Alfer, for asking this question. But I think that he has the answer to the question because he's currently working in financial sectors as well.
Okay.
So what I'd like to say is that Tan Suu Kyi at that time really pursues populist politics, and what she was trying to do is to make people believe in her cause, and also in her cause for what is it, infrastructure policies, especially that she wanted the people to believe that all of these infrastructure projects would be done in order to serve people. But as we can see in the case of Turkey back then, the infrastructure project that was being conducted by Turkey's government under the leadership of Tan Suu Kyi and also the coalition cabinet were not successful because it is not being made to the need of the people. So it is just what is it, a game of that were being deployed by the government of Turkey under the Tan Suu Kyi's leadership to make the government at least show itself as working in front of the people. So many of the strategic projects that were being initiated by Tan Suu Kyi could not really address the needs of the people, and after that, the infrastructure were not really helping. So yeah, Turkey is falling into another debt crisis, and after that, Turkey has to borrow some loans from IMF. When we are looking into Indonesia, we can see that not all, many of the infrastructure projects are really contributing to Indonesia's economics. Of course, there are critics that some of the infrastructure projects will raise up money, and also we can see this particularly in the case of the high-speed train between Jakarta and Bandung, which obviously has spent a lot of taxpayers' money and also really risked Indonesia into another debt issue with China. And this is something that we should be looking into. So I think that infrastructure project could be helpful and in helping Indonesia to develop its economy, and also to uplift the life quality of its citizens. But we have to really look into the necessity and also how this infrastructure project will really impact to the people's life and also people's economic condition. So that's what I have to say in this context, Mr.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hazza. And the next question is for Mr. Ayan. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Ayan, are there any obstacles for Sri Lanka to rise or revive from the crisis?
Are there any obstacles too?
For Sri Lanka to revive or rise from the crisis?
Yeah, there are plenty of obstacles, of course. For example, in both in front of economy and political. But in fact, whatever we said, it's all of them were the obstacles. But amid crisis, there are hopes. So the first thing, as I said, one of the crises is the diplomatic thing, which I haven't mentioned, because its equation with US was not fine. At the same time, you needed regional supporter. So they actually never, the Sri Lanka, always ached New Delhi, So it has to gain confidence of some supporters, including Japan, economies like France, and then the capitals like Washington, D.C., because maintaining relation with US is a very very serious thing. At the same time, when they're talking about this Bretton Woods institutions. So there an acute shortage of fuel and energy, and Colombo is in talks with Russia and Qatar for the flow of oil. So it has to they have to make sure they are not making Washington DC annoyed. That's one of the things. So basically, the diplomacy they have to handle very carefully. Yeah, and the macroeconomists they have to listen too. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anand. I actually forgot to mention that the previous question was from Ms. Rafa Humaira. Okay, thank you for asking, Ms. Rafa. Okay, the next question from our head of department, and this question is for both speakers. Is there any chance for Sri Lanka and also Turkey to deploy a more state-centric approach, such as illiberal capitalism, for instance, for mitigating further economic damage? Okay, so this question is for both Mr. Haza and also Mr. Ayan. Maybe who should answer first, Mr. Ayan or Mr. Haza?
Okay, I think I wanted to answer first, so
okay.
Ayan
sure.
can.
All right. No, please.
Yeah. Okay. So Turkey is currently under the state of what certain academics call as authoritarian neoliberalism. So we are currently having state as someone who is dominating, the politics of finance and economy in Turkey. So what Turkey is needing is not more state involvement in in its financial and economic policies, but Turkey has to restore the independence of its financial institution, and also has to rationalize its political values in order to regain back its economic achievement that it uses to obtain during the early 2000s. The reason why a party was so successful in 2000s is because Turkey's government under the first premiership of Erdogan, particularly in the years of 2003 upwards to 2010, was successful in collaborating with many actors, with European Union as well as with many academics and many playmakers in Turkey's economy, and therefore many are trusting their investment in Turkey, because Turkey was seen as one of the remarkable players in the global economy, as well as the regional economy in Middle East and Eastern Europe. So Turkey has really had to return to its initial play. Well, I'm not really agreeing with neoliberal assumptions of economic system, but at least it was working in Turkey's case. But what really Erdogan's and also his government really sees is to act rational in this time of crisis. This is something that a lot of Turkish people wanted to see from Erdogan, unless they will opt for someone else which can provide them with realistic solutions to solve the current crisis.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haza. And Mr. Ayan, please.
Yeah, see, I don't understand economics, so it's better not to answer that way. But of course, yeah, Sri Lanka's will have a mix of policies. In certain aspect, you will find, the conservatism, and certain aspect you have to liberalize economy for sure, because they don't have any other option. When you are bringing IMF, when you are bringing international institution, they will of course ask, international economies, they ask for entry. They would like to create more footmark in the land. So you have to liberalize economy, but at the same time you have to reserve yourself. You have to have a strong conservative approach as well, so that the money stays in the country. Yeah, and to the people. It should belong to the people. Yeah, so it's a mix of things. And in certain aspect they will have a liberalized approach, and certain aspect they will have more conservative approach. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anand. And I have one more question before we end tonight's discussion. And this question is for both Mr. Haza and also Mr. Anand. Mr. Haza, what you can learn from Turkey's crisis? I mean, what can Indonesia learn from Turkey's crisis? And for Mr. Anand, what can India, Indonesia, and also other countries learn from Sri Lanka's crisis? Okay, maybe from Mr. Anand first.
Okay, so where this question is coming from? Is it from Indonesia?
No, it's from me. Is my question.
Oh, okay.
What can Indonesia, India, and also other countries, because we should develop the sense of crisis, right? Even though it happens in Sri Lanka, but it doesn't mean that it can also happen in other countries. What do you think about it, Mr. Ayan?
Yeah, there are a lot of countries, you know. It reminds me of the line, the center can't hold, things fall apart, you know. And also there's a counter argument by Chino Achebe, center cannot hold. So the countries can learn a lot. For example, the emerging economies. Freebies politics, the populism thing is the greatest thing. But out of this big picture, what I see, the people's, you know, jill and tarnishing the power, the right back, you know, the rights of the people and the electorates, they're the ultimate thing when you know, the center or an authoritarianism takes place. Because what happens in Sri Lanka is not an economic problem at all. It's the superficially it appears to be an economic crisis. But if you you know, post-mortem it, if you analyze it, the ultimate thing is like it's a political disaster, the nepotism, the this, you know, dynastical politics. In Sri Lanka, there's a thing called KGB rules the politics. KGB. This KGB is not Russia's intelligence. This KGB is Kandyan, Gobigama, and Buddhist. So these three factors make the Sri Lankans ruler. First example, India has certain, you know, factors. Indonesia as well. So casteist figures, then, you know, the dynasties. For example, Kandi is a place in Sri Lanka. So where they belong to, they are among this ruling factor, then the Kobigama, the caste, and the religion, Buddhist. So India has to, of course, India has to give a thought about its economy, what the populist politics are coming from, which we have already discussed. Narendra Modi, our Prime Minister, called the meeting or the all-party meeting. They said, and this is a strong concern for the states which are, you know, using freebie politics. Unfortunately, many of our states are doing in India. But, you know, this what India can learn apart and then the other emerging state, a particular regime rules not just in its lifetime, but their sons and grandsons. So the developing states has to know that dynasty has an end, and people has to believe this. The new leaders emerge, and new leaders emerge from a time of crisis, from the rebellions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anand, for the closing statement. And Mr. Haza?
Okay, I think as Turkey approaches its 100 years since its inception as a republic, Turkey will also need new political vision. And I think this is something that many political figures in Turkey is trying to devise and also put into action. And I think what Turkey needs to do is something that is related on how to really restore the public's confidence to Turkey's government. Turkish people always believe in its state, but it doesn't always believe in its government. That's something that I need to say. But what Indonesia can learn from Turkey. So I think that Indonesia has done a lot of good job in terms of really balancing the needs of people and also the needs of the economy. But we still have to be careful because there are certain predictions that will that says that a recession it's ready to say hi to Indonesia. So we really have to wait and see what the government of Indonesia has in its hand. But as long as Indonesia's financial institution, particularly the central bank, is can really be independent in this due course, then I think that Indonesia would be staying hopefully in the right course. So that's what I have to say, Ms. Dian. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Haza, and also Mr. Ayan for joining us today. And for our beloved viewers, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like our videos. And we have reached the end of our tonight's discussion. And on behalf of the Diplomacy Lab and also Department of International Relations, Universitas Islam Indonesia, I am Dian, signing off from Yogyakarta. Goodbye and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.